Good evening and welcome to Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Thambi. The events that unfolded recently in Kathmandu, Nepal, shocked the world for the brutality, the violence, and also the swiftness with which they occurred. And Sri Lankans in particular want to know what happened, what's the inside story, why is it that this Nepalese movement is so different from our Aragalaya. And to talk about this and much more, I am delighted to welcome to our studio Mr. Kanak Dixit, who is the founding editor of Himal South Asian, a writer, a civil rights activist, heritage and public transport activist, and a best-selling children's author. Good evening and welcome, Kanak.
Thank you. Thank you, Niresh.
Right. So, Kanak, tell us what took place in Kathmandu and around Nepal. What sparked it? Why did it suddenly erupt? Because here in Sri Lanka, our Aragalaya took months to build up to that particular crescendo.
Yeah.
But in Kathmandu, it just seemed to erupt in a few days.
Yeah.
What happened?
In a way, it's still a developing story. But just 16 days ago, today, on the 8th of September, you had a dharna, as we call it, a demonstration called by the younger generation, Gen Z, as they term themselves, in downtown Kathmandu. It was a 3-hour event. It became larger than expected, perhaps for the police, and there is talk of some infiltration by motivated forces who in a way took over that march towards Parliament, and the police did not do enough to try to use demonstration control methods, then riot control methods. None of that was used until the demonstrators entered the Parliament building, and then the shots rang out. 19 dead. And that led to the eruption. 19 dead was bad enough, but the next day the whole country was in flames with arson, loot. Yes, like you say, it was indeed very swift, but the build-up had to do with the fact that Nepal's very capable mainstream journalists had been covering corruption cases over the last few years. But those corruption cases did not get traction in the administration or in the courts. So there was a bottled up anger, resentment was there. Then the government decided, upon a Supreme Court directive, but slightly misinterpreting it, the Supreme Court had said, make a law to have some level of regulation on the social media portals. The government instead brought out a governmental directive, but still the intention was to tell Meta, i.e. Facebook and WhatsApp and LinkedIn and you have YouTube, to have a point person so there can be investigations. But in the process, when the government, when they did not respond, snubbing Nepal in a way and its sovereign decision, the government turned off these portals. Did not realize or miscalculated the way social media has taken over our lives, both for reasons right, such as livelihoods, communication with migrant workers, families, talking to each other, or in a way, the addiction that much of the population is now also engaged in with the use of these portals and entertainment. So the Gen Z or Generation Z representatives had called that 3-hour demonstration on the platform of resisting that government suspension of social media, but behind it, corruption and malgovernance. That was the idea. It was all done for a good purpose, but I do believe it was hijacked.
But that often happens, doesn't it? And where you do have genuine movements, but then behind it, you suddenly have somebody else coming in and hijacking it, using it. But I'm very surprised that the Nepali government didn't have prior intelligence warnings that something like this could happen. And at the very disconnect between the government and the youngsters and the world at large, because social media is here to stay. You can't, the genie is out of the bottle. Pandora's box has been opened for good or bad, and it's out there. You cannot just turn it off without consequences.
To answer both the points you've made, one is there is no doubt that the government was not able to govern properly, including in riot control. There are ways to control demonstrations.
You don't have to shoot people.
Yeah, it wasn't. Not only that, but when it came to the point where the shooting began, the processes of barricades and tear gas and baton charges and, if you will, rubber bullets, if at all, leading straight to actual live bullet fire after not doing anything in between. Even the activists themselves said later, we are walking towards the parliament and there was nobody to stop us. There were ropes, one activist said. And as far as I know, there was one barricade, whereas earlier they would have had many. It could be intelligence failure. It could be thinking that these youngsters would not bring the numbers, whatever. But on the other hand, as far as understanding what the younger generation is thinking and doing, I think we are all complicit in that. And I wouldn't only blame the government, although the government takes the blame for being in charge and should ensure everything from the fact that there are no live bullets fired at young demonstrators to understand what genie you are going to bring out of the bottle. It's your job, you're a government. But I can tell you that I myself did not know the communication app called Discord, which was all the rage among the youngsters when they're communicating with each other through Discord, making plans, announcing it, Reddit, Discord, WhatsApp, Twitter, TikTok. They're using all the tools available to them to announce this demonstration, and thereafter once they got into a kind of a driving seat after the government was on the defensive and the next day the prime minister resigned, in the power vacuum, they were actually using votes on Discord to select their prime minister. And incidentally, the person that they selected, maybe 6 or 8 or 10,000 individuals, as far as I know, the person that they voted for in the end is our interim prime minister today. So it's an incredible use of technology, if you will. I don't know if it has been done elsewhere, and I certainly don't know if it's appropriate way to choose an interim prime minister, but that is what happened in Nepal.
So what next for Nepal? I know elections are now on the cards. The interim prime minister has said so. But between now and then, what do you expect?
We have 5.5 months. The Constitution dictates that when a government departs, elections have to be announced with a date, maximum 6 months. So that is what we've got. So March 5 is the election. In between, it's going to be an unstable time where all of us involved in civil society or the political parties or the Gen Z leadership, our work is cut out for us to remain within the Constitution. You see, the Constitution of Nepal is very much alive but wounded. How is it wounded? As the president of Nepal, Ramchandra Paurel himself has said, it has been wounded. He said this to us, civil society people, citizens who went to meet him. He said, the constitution has been wounded to the extent of the appointment of the prime minister. That has to be through parliament, and we've gone outside the parliament, and we have negotiated with the young activists with the help of the Nepal army acting as the facilitator, if you will. This is according to our president. But that beyond this, the constitution lives. It'll live because he didn't mention this, but the president remains in place, the president of the republic, and elections are slated for 5 March, and by 5 March we will have elections, and hence we will go back onto the rails of a slightly derailed constitution. That is what he said, and that is his job as a president to say. We were worried because he had disappeared from the scene for the first 2 or 3 days. And the worry was that everybody who had been taken in for security was actually then under house arrest of the Nepal army. Some of that is probably true. But despite that, the political parties have now started coming out. Everybody was in danger for 2 days. So everybody went for cover, even those that had not been taken into secure locations by the Nepal army, because the police was nowhere to be seen. The police had to be protected by the citizens. The armed police force was nowhere to be seen, and the army essentially restored order by showing up on the streets. But in my view, too late for the destruction not to happen.
Now, Kanak, in Sri Lanka's Aragalaya, despite many provocations, there was always an element or elements of the demonstrators who served to prevent violence on the part of the demonstrators to a large extent. There were, of course, several days when the government forces cracked down so harshly that there was, of course, a response, and that is, of course, open to a lot of conjecture as to who did what. But now I spoke about the fact that the Aragalaya was many months in the making, and it was almost completely peaceful. But in Nepal, we saw this eruption of violence. But at the same time, you spoke of the fact that citizens were trying to protect the police and so on. Could you give us a feel for this? Because what we saw on TV and, of course, on social media was a lot of violence. We didn't see the other side.
Absolutely. I can tell you the violence has been heart-stopping, and it is historical. To give due credit to whoever should take credit, the deaths, horrific as they were, did not add up to more than 100. But how horrific they were, I can tell you. The first day, that is the 8th of September, when we heard that the police had started firing, and the first death that was confirmed already was too much, because we knew that the nature of the state in Nepal, such as it is, would change. Then the government would be defensive because one person had died. It was bad enough. But one after another, deaths kept coming in. And by the end of the day, right there in that blood-splattered space outside the parliament, it was 19 dead. So that was bad enough. And then the next day, the larger eruption, to me. And how did it happen? Firstly, what happened? Nepal suddenly, as a journalist friend said, we don't have a government and our leaders don't have homes. That's how bad it was. In an event a week later, at a Constitution Day, was just a few days later, the president called an event, and the senior-most leader of one party came without his topi, his cap, Nepali cap. And I asked him why. He said, it's all burnt, it's all gone. And a very senior lady, came in her daughter's sari because she had none. And even as we speak, the house of every prominent leader is destroyed. Customs offices, land offices records across the country, local government offices, police stations, homes of business leaders, what have you. Anybody with prominence was not safe those 2 days. I have been through process of fighting the king, battling as a journalist in times of the insurgency. I have never felt as insecure as the 9th of September. You had to protect your own. They could come after you. Schools were torched. All kinds of things happened. Why and how? I'm sure that's what you need to know. What happened in Nepal? Firstly, in Sri Lanka and in Colombo, the institutions held. There would have been perhaps enough of a socialization into the understanding of democratic institutions, perhaps even in the large youth groups, that meant that there was a particular point beyond which you wouldn't go. One example is, as I was coming into Colombo, I saw the presidential secretariat, right? The one with the large steps going up.
That's right.
And on television, I saw it. People walking in, looking around like tourists, a mass of tourists, and walking out. In the case of Nepal, they walked in, looted, torched, but beyond that, nobody came to save these buildings. So there was complete institutional collapse, partly because there was a governmental vacuum. The Prime Minister was made to resign by the security forces led by the army, who said, we can't protect you anymore. So he resigned. By the time he resigned, there was 10 hours between his resignation and when the army, with prior announcement on the 9th of September, came on the streets at night at 10 p.m. All mayhem ensued during that time. And once people saw it happen in Kathmandu, it happened everywhere. And to tell you how grievous this hurt was in Nepal, a mob went to release a particular political leader in prison. In the process, and this is the central prison, the main prison, in the process released all the detainees, not detainees, jailed prisoners, rapists, murderers, people waiting trial, whatever. Then that happened all over the country. 14,000 prisoners left, making our whole society insecure. By now, about 3,000 have been brought back in. So this has been historical, meaning not while the number of dead, awful as it is, did not cross 100, but the torching of state institutions, the main secretariat, the Supreme Court, and the Parliament building, all within a radius of 2 kilometers of the army headquarters. But they get torched, but the ex-king's residence doesn't, and neither does the former royal palace. Everything is intact except the people's spaces, people's institutions. It hasn't happened. Such kind of arson and destruction has not happened historically in Nepal, going back hundreds of years. There is no historical record. There are earthquakes, but no human-made quake such as this.
Now, Kanak, even journalists were not spared, and media institutions. They were also attacked and under threat. So many colleagues that we were fearful for here in Sri Lanka. Could you elaborate on that?
Any institution with a profile, any institution had aroused the ire of any part of the other side was attacked. So if it is a media house like Kantipur, highly prominent media house which has got print and radio and television, other print media, television stations, anybody with credible profile was attacked. And journalists certainly feared for their life at that time. What I can tell you is probably, and this is my honest conjecture, on the 8th, the event that was called, it's a 3-hour event that has changed the course of Nepali history. 3 hours called by Gen Z representatives. Who they were became clearer later on. Some of them within the Gen Zs also seem to have hijacked the Gen Z leadership later when it came time to announce and choose a prime minister. But they got to work in that vacuum I told you about. But a 3-hour demonstration where the ranks may have been swelled by motivated individuals who joined, who started the march to parliament, which was not in the plan. And then the police botched it tragically with the killings. And then it was a free-for-all. So on the evening of the 9th, I was thinking perhaps it is just motivated arsonists, anarchists who were playing in that vacuum. But thinking back on it, starting the 10th of September, it cannot but have been orchestrated. Not the Gen Z demonstration of the 8th, and not even the march to parliament, which may or may not have been, but everything that happened, the torching of state institutions and private buildings and homes of leaders, etc., it would be motivated. The question would be, who would have orchestrated it?
A harrowing tale indeed, and hopefully it will improve over the next weeks and months. We need to take a short break now. I am in conversation with Mr. Kanak Dixit, who is, of course, a well-known journalist and editor from Kathmandu. Don't go away, we'll be right back.
A trusted place for your fixed deposits. Valuable FD, 10.25% for 15 months, 11% for 24 months. Valuable FD, the symbol of stability.
කාන්තා ලෝක කුසලාන තරංගාවලියේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා කණ්ඩායමටම හදවතින්ම සුබ පතනවා ජයග්‍රහණය කරන්න.
දිනත් ජයවර්ධන සිරන්ත විජේබණ්ඩාර
සතියේ දිනවල රාත්‍රී 8:30ට
සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්
බදිනුම් වීරේ බදිනුම්
ඔය ඔබ කරපු පව ඔබ පස්සේ එන්න පටන් ගන්නවා.
අද මේ වෙලාවේ වුණත් එයා මාව හොයාගෙනයි කියලා මං හිතනවා. එක වසනයක් කතා කරලා දෙනවා තවසට උඩ කවතලා වෙලා යන්න මොකද?
රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්
පොත් අස්සේ වාක්‍ය අස්සේ හැංගිලා තින දේ නෙවෙයි ජීවිතය කියන්නේ. හැංගීම් වලයි ජීවිතය කියන්නේ.
තනු
මං ඔයාලා කියන දේ ගැන හිතුවා විනු.
ඒ පහන් නිසාම අපේ ප්ලෑන් එකේ ඉතුරු ටික විනාශ වෙන්න දෙන්න බෑ.
හැබැයි කවදාවත් මගේ ජීවිතේ බෙරගන්න කියලා මගේ ජීවිතේ දෙන්න එපා. මෑණියන්ගේ අනාවකේ සිද්ධ වෙච්ච දේ.
මේ තරම දියසීමක් නැද්ද? අක්කේ මේ හොදට
සංසාරා අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am speaking with Kanak Dixit, who is a well-known journalist and rights activist from Nepal. Kanak, you spoke about these demonstrations in Kathmandu and throughout Nepal after that being orchestrated. Whom are you referring to,
So,
if you don't mind?
No, I will refer to the possible orchestrators, right? Because they don't come out with a press release. So you'll have to make an educated guess as to who they might be or who benefits. Firstly, I would say when it comes to the larger geopolitical context, because people are always on hand to blame foreign forces, foreign hand, etc. It'll be important at least to set the stage to say Nepal has a constitution adopted, promulgated in 2015. India, the government of India was unhappy with it, and it also slapped a blockade on Nepal, 5.5 months. And the person who was Prime Minister then was KP Oli, and KP Oli also led the change in the Nepali constitution to have a map that includes, according to Nepali papers and perspectives, a part of the state of Uttarakhand that India considers its own. It's a small triangle up there. So Nepal's constitution was changed to bring in that. So the government of India under Mr. Modi has no love lost for Mr. KP Oli. Then, because he stood tall during the blockade as Prime Minister, and then also did this map, and he is somebody who has challenged some notions of Mr. Modi, such as where is Ayodhya, the birthplace of Sri Ram, or what about the slogan of the Indian state, Satyameva Jayate, and Mr. Oli suggested you could as well say Singamaya Jayate, rather than truth. The lion is representative of the ethos of the Indian state. Then, in just days before September 8th, he was in Tianjin, China, for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO.
SCO, yes.
And then he attended the Victory Day parade in Beijing, and he met Mr. Xi Jinping, the President of China, and raised the matter of an agreement between India and China about the very space for trade, the very space that Nepal considers its own, and he raised it in a public meeting. And then he also met Mr. Putin. So that is the context. If you have to have a geopolitical context without pointing any fingers, Nepal as a strategic country for the West, for India, the Prime Minister doing these upfront activities is the context, because everything that happened within the next 3-4 days, number one. Number two, as for who may have been motivated to take advantage of the situation, there are political forces in Nepal that are neophyte forces who realize that they can use social media and the momentum against the two large parties, because you kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. The Oli government was a coalition, a grand coalition of the Nepali Congress and the UML, the two largest parties of Nepal, the two largest, and I might say, democratic parties of Nepal. The Maoists were a poor third. So whoever wanted to see these two big parties simultaneously be humiliated and brought down and quickly move towards elections, they would have been interested. And so that would mean a party called the RSP, Rashtriya Swatantra Party, and then there would also be the Royalist Party, RPP, and there would be the Maoists, who are now a poor third and would want some kind of jostling of the state mechanisms, and then there would be the, if you will, the right-wing Hindutva RSS supported forces within Nepal, and the RSS of India Hindutva, proponents of Hindutva, which means politically charged entities utilizing the religion of Hinduism, they all would be interested in A, toppling of this government of the two largest parties, B, if possible, bringing down the constitution, because Nepal's constitution on the 2015 promulgation is secular, republican, right, and federal, and it sticks in the craw of many groups in Nepal. So the first goal was achieved by whoever actually came together to do this, but certainly in the rioters, many individuals identified on social media, because they were gleefully going about it and filming themselves, are from these groups I mentioned to you. So were they coordinated? Did they just come in? Did they plan it? Perhaps they were waiting for a trigger, because the royalists in particular had tried to do something of a go on rampage, so to speak, in March to bring back the kingship, and that didn't happen. So you've got kingship, you got Hindutva, RSS linked forces, you got new political forces who want to take advantage, and you got the Maoists who are a poor third now. These would be the groups either working in cohesion or independently, but somebody was lying in wait to create mayhem. And unfortunately, the Gen Z demonstration was hijacked for this purpose.
Well, that's quite a combustible sort of situation, isn't it? And then it's hardly surprising as to what happened in the end, although it's shocking. Now, can I...
in Nepal, let me just mention, in Nepal's history, we divide it neatly. It's never neatly divided, but we say we have the Lichavi era, the Malla era, the Shah Rana era. Then in 1950, we get the brief flowering of democracy. Then the Panchayat era. Then the Maoists started the insurgency, and then 10 years of insurgency, another 10 years to bring them in from the cold. Never in this period has Nepal seen this type of devastation of institutions, this type of arson and looting.
Now, we've seen, of course, these revolutionary movements which took place in Sri Lanka, then in Bangladesh, which is still an unsettled situation, and now in Nepal. What about the rest of South Asia? And I ask you this because when I first met you, which must have been 25 or 30 years ago, and that was a time when this pan-South Asian movement had not really occurred to most of us. But you were championing this even back then, you and several others. But you always, even back then, spoke of South Asia as one entity because we have so much in common. And now we seem to be, this seems to be South Asia's time when you think of the rest of the world and the economic growth that we see in India and so on. But at the same time, this is also a very unsettling time for South Asia, with so many countries in a precarious situation. And of course, beyond it, you always have the India-Pakistan, the mess that we have had to live with.
Well, firstly, I see South Asia, the idea of South Asia as a social justice project. It is that our economies could be doing so much better if we were linked, but we are not. Our people could be learning from each other so much more if they were linked, but we are not. We are siloed. For example, if Nepali social scientists had kept track of what's happening in Sri Lanka, we in Nepal may have been better prepared for what was to come. Because they would say, oh, Sri Lanka has these institutions, our institutions are weakened. So what would happen if there is an eruption? So I think we must get over this, the silos that we've been put into. I give you an example as we speak. There is a singer, a balladeer in Assam. His name is Zubeen Garg. He died, and all of the northeast of India has been in mourning for the last 8-9 days because he meant so much for them. The rest of South Asia, including large parts of India, of which Assam and the northeast is part, as well as Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, we wouldn't know that one part of our region is in such pain. So I believe that then coming to the distress that we have experienced, the Argalaya, luckily, fortunately, the distress was limited and there was a release through constitutional mechanisms, and there was a force, the NPP, waiting to take advantage of the situation and the defrocking of the larger parties. Bangladesh had been taken to an edge by Sheikh Hasina, who had destroyed the opposition, the BNP. And then came the uprising and her party was destroyed. So there was a vacuum. In that vacuum came the students from one side and the Islamists from the other. And as we speak, and I hope it's untrue, but the Islamists seem to be gaining the upper hand on the students in Bangladesh. Then Nepal, not looking at Bangladesh, Nepal's civil society, Nepal's student groups, Nepal's Gen Z generations, all of them looking only at themselves and no comparative knowledge, nor, sadly in this day and age, knowledge, and this doesn't apply only to Gen Z, but the teaching of history, philosophy, economics, geography. Geography for a country like Nepal is very important, but Nepali youngsters and even generations ahead of Gen Z don't know Nepali geography for a country like Nepal. So Pakistan is under military control, which means that Pakistan will be bottled up for much longer. India is so large that even when there are grand, great movements within parts of India, it will not make the international news. And so in India also, distress will take longer to boil up. In our societies, and this is one way to look at it, and somebody may say it's a more positive way to look at it, that in our societies, let's say for now Sri Lanka and Nepal, there is democracy holds, and so if you have anger, because the state cannot come down as harshly, well, at least in the case of Nepal, the anarchists got away. Whereas if you have a more autocratic state, the anarchy cannot go that way. Then that is not by way of supporting any kind of autocracy. It's just that we have allowed our democratic institutions to decay. The parties have been run by bosses. They're not internally democratic at all. So all I would say therefore is that from the South Asian perspective, we all need to learn no country, no society compares to the other. But if you studied in depth each society, and for example, if Indian scholars right now or Pakistani scholars were studying Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, to compare and contrast, they may better prepare their own societies or parts of their own regions of within their own countries better. So we must look at each other than try to find answers outside South Asia.
And you are actually part of a new project to broad-base history and philosophy. You gave me this brochure earlier, which is a program which is run by Kathmandu University and the South Asia Institute for History and Philosophy.
Yeah.
You've launched an MA in History and Philosophy, yes, and other programs. What do you see that's lacking, especially with the so-called Gen Z and social media out there.
Yes.
Do you see, with your vast experience, that perhaps there is so much information, but there is little wisdom?
There is a lot of information, and some of that information is actually provided for you through a motivated system. So when you think you have information, actually it is not all the information that you need. It's only the information that you want, that is being fed to you by the social media giants, right? There is that. Then there is this whole idea, what are we missing out in this surfeit of information? We're missing out, yes, wisdom. We're missing context. We're missing perspective. And we're all in a rush, and we don't have time to sit back and read a treatise, an essay, a chapter. And this is no criticism of anyone, because elders have also become that way. A social scientist, a dean actually told me recently, Kanak, listen, when have you read your last book and when have I read my last book? That is how things are. So I feel that, but that can't be true for everyone. And you do need opinion makers that have studied perspectives, context, comparativeness, and everything could be seen through the prism of history and philosophy, including economics, geography, technology, society. So what we felt was South Asia needs, because our legacy institutions have got weakened, and we are no longer producing master's graduates who can be teachers, opinion makers, policy makers with a background in humanities. Of course, there are exceptions, but by and large, in all our countries, north of South Asia, south of South Asia, South India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, we're not doing justice to our future by neglecting humanities. And that's where I believe, in the context of the kind of roiling we've seen and the violence we've seen in Nepal, and the uncertainties of the immediate future, uncertainties also of Bangladesh's immediate future, Sri Lanka seems to have found its footing. To understand it, in order to be able to achieve what the genius of South Asia should make it possible. Because right now, as we speak, the volume of distress, material distress, and possibly mental distress in the whole globe, there is more of it in South Asia, particularly the northern half, than anywhere else. The depth of poverty and the distress, because South Asia has a fourth of the world's population, and it's inconsolable. I am inconsolable, and it's not at all appropriate that social science, not humanities, not guide us into the future.
Now, you mentioned the weakening of institutions, but it's not just state-run institutions, it is also civil society institutions. And you have been in the forefront of such institutions, especially in human rights and journalistic media rights and so on. And here in Colombo, you've actually participated in several programs which are aimed at these areas. And one such program that you launched along with your colleagues from across South Asia is the South Asian Council for Human Rights. Would you tell us a little bit about this? Why have you guys launched this? And when I say you guys, there are a lot of ladies on this council.
Yes.
And of course, they are from all council members are from all of South Asia. Why now? What is the need?
The need was felt even before today, when these conflagrations happened in my country, and Bangladesh remains in tenterhooks and parts of the larger countries of South Asia where so much injustice is happening, including essentially a police state in parts of India and in Pakistan, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We don't hear of them enough because they are within their nation states, and we only then hear of what's happening in the national capital and in the national government. So there is distress as we speak everywhere in South Asia, more of it in the northern half of South Asia. So we felt since the last year or two that there is a need for a coming together of people who have seen it all and continue to see it, but people who have fought the system for peace, democracy, human rights, and social justice. We must come together to speak out and speak up on matters. So this council, the term is human rights, but it's a human rights broadly understood, including climate rights, including an ability for to speak up about great injustices in terms of access to water. There are so many things that can be seen from a regional prism without making it lightweight, because there's a danger when you look at all of South Asia that you go for the, and you pass comment, you go for the lowest common denominator, which doesn't mean anything to anybody. Anybody can agree. No, we felt now those of us, and there are 7 of us from Pakistan, from India, more than one from India because of its size, from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, and from Nepal. For now, we hope to expand it. We felt it is very important to speak up on issues of the day, and if required, courageously. If required, willing to be pilloried and trolled, because the experience of trolling throughout decades, especially, but it's a little worse in the time of social media, of course, but trolling has always existed for people who try to live by their convictions. So anyway, without making too much of it and not to be at all self-important, we thought we should speak up. And one example I can tell you right now is Gaza. South Asia, all of South Asia, meaning the governments, all voted for Palestine and recognition of Palestine in the General Assembly vote. However, why is it that we cannot have a common voice and a common statement? Because if you can have individualized statements, then why cannot all of them get together? That is not happening, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. So much interaction is needed in South Asia, so much introspection is needed, and we thought our group, the South Asia Council for Human Rights, could perhaps break the silence.
And indeed, your council members are quite impressive, and you have been fighting for human rights. All the council members have been fighting for human rights for decades, as long as I can remember, and I've been in media for a very long time. Good luck to you and your mission. And I'm afraid we are out of time. It's been a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you back in Colombo soon. And I hope to meet you again. And it shouldn't be 25 years because
yes,
it has been something like
that. Yeah.
Right. So my thanks to Kanak Dixit, founder, editor of Himal South Asian, and noted civil rights activist and an activist in many areas. Thank you very much for being with me this evening.
Thank you, Dirish.
And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.
TV1. TV for life.
President meets Japanese Prime Minister. Stalled projects to recommence. 1 billion rupee grant to purchase high-tech UAEs for the Navy. Substances found with Moldovan national in Valigama confirmed to be deadly drug, mephedrone. How were the containers in Midania released? CID launches probe. Top narcotics figures to be questioned. MP Archana enlarged on bail following stern warning after arrest for violating road rules and obstructing police duty. Namal visits Archana in courts. 3 dead in Mavanalla after Mound of Earth collapses. Bus tickets mandatory in Western Province from the 1st of October. 3-wheeler registration process to resume. India-Pakistan tension spills onto cricket field. India refuses to accept Asia Cup trophy from PCB chairman. Pakistan reacts strongly to Prime Minister Modi's congratulatory message. Google agrees to provide AI tools for Sri Lankan students for free.